Hello, world, and welcome back to another episode of Practicing Awakening from the Meaning Crisis. My name is Sarah, and I'm here with my friend Lizelle, and today we're going to be talking about episode 22, which is called Descartes versus Hobbes. And it's interesting because today is the 22nd of July when we're filming this, so there's a big emphasis on the 22 for me. And we're also filming this the day that Venus stations retrograde, so that's especially important for me as well as an astrologer. So I just wanted to presence those two energies. And now I'm going to pass it over to Lizelle to get us started with a quote.
Hello, world. Seeing that Venus is in retrograde, although I didn't know it or when I planned it, but it's perfect. I'm going to an old love of mine, Jordan Peterson. If people ask me who's my favorite philosopher, I say John Vervaeke. If they ask me who's the philosopher who had the greatest influence on you, I say Jordan Peterson. He was my first love. He introduced me to John. So thank you, Jordan. I'm going to start with a quote from him, and then we'll come back also with a quote from him. I also want to say that I think in a certain sense, it's a bit sad that he's so popular, because popular often becomes shallow. And I was just reading through some of his work because I had like, I want to read Jordan for this episode. Don't know why. Well, I didn't know why. Now I do. And rereading passages from him, I was like, this guy is so deep. He's such a deep and profound thinker, actually. And because of him being so famous and infamous at the same time, I think a lot of, not what he says himself, but what people say about his work or about him does tend to shallow up a little bit. So, yeah, a side note, Mars retrograde, side note, I guess. So I'm going to read a whole passage, a whole paragraph, although there's just like one or two sentences that I really stood out for me. A few months earlier, in March 2012, I had received an email from a literary agent. She had heard me speak on CBC radio during a show entitled Just Say No to Happiness, where I had criticized the idea that happiness was the proper goal for life. Over the previous decades, I had read more than my share of dark books about the 20th century, focusing particularly on Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union. Alexander Solzhenitsyn, I'm so sorry for absolutely saying this wrong, Solzhenitsyn, the great documenter of the slave labor camp horrors of the latter, once wrote that the pitiful ideology, and he's quoting him those words, pitiful ideology, holding that human beings are created for happiness, was an ideology done in by the first blow of a work assigner's cudgel. In a crisis, the inevitable suffering that life entails can rapidly make a mockery of the idea that happiness is the proper pursuit of the individual. On the radio show, I suggested instead that a deeper meaning was required. I noted that the nature of such meaning was constantly represented in the great stories of the past, and that it had more to do with developing character in the face of suffering than with happiness. This is part of the long history of the present work.
Well, when you finished that, what came to mind was that hard work builds character. Because when I used to mow the lawn as a kid, that was always something that we would joke about, is it builds character. My dad would always say that. So, yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, Jordan actually was one of the first for me too, because I watched his biblical lectures or listened to them while I was doing classwork. Or sorry, no, it was while I was working at the dialysis revenue center. So it was one of those mindless jobs, very meaningless. And I'm listening to this guy talk about like biblical stories and really epic things. So yeah, there was actually like even meaning being infused into the very innocuous life that I was living in, that just from hearing the stories of other people. So
Yay, Jordan.
yay, Jordan. Good job. You've done great. All right. Well, for this episode, we're building on Descartes and then putting him up against Hobbes. So we got Hobbes in one corner and Descartes in the other. The battle of the individual soul, we should say, the isolated individual mind.
The battle of the individual soul. Hey, everybody, welcome today to the battle of the individual soul. We have Descartes in one corner, and he will be facing up against Hobbes.
Brilliant. Let's get ready to rumble.
Okay. I do think that is the masculine energy of Jordan Peterson that was just present a little bit too much.
Yes. Yeah. Wow. Taking on the marker and like carrying the flag. Yes. Yeah.
Because we did not plan this.
No, that wasn't planned. That just came through as we channeled our dear JBP. Okay, yeah. Well, another thing too that I mentioned, the reason maybe some of that was coming in for me too was that this was what I said was maybe one of the first times that I saw John getting into dialogue between two entities as having a conversation. And they did truly in real life, like there was letters exchanged between Descartes and Hobbes, and so that's what he's reflecting on. But it's nice when John gets into character and can have the dialogue between them that's just really fluid coming out.
Yes, it makes history really real.
Yeah.
To me, it's like really like these little glimpses into the history of philosophy, like, pointing to the letters and how they probably felt about each other, or the tone that was expressed in their letters. It's really cool. I love that.
Yeah, I'm also getting this realization that we tend to understand these people and their discoveries in isolation as just this person discovered this thing. And so there's that isolated mind in that too of, looking for heroes, looking for people to aspire to be like, and this individual pursuit. I want to be like that person, a very limited a thing to aspire to be.
Oh, that's a really great connection that you made. Because it's exactly that, the individual mind that we're trying to conquer in the awakening from a meaning crisis, and how even our history is so focused on the individual and the individual mind and the individual's accomplishments that there's a lot of rewriting history, but I'm not sure if history has been rewritten from a collective point of view.
So where we landed with Descartes last time. Want to start there? All I have is that we are trying to compute reality for certainty. There is this now endeavor for certainty because we feel like the math is going to give it to us.
Yes. That was Descartes' project indeed. He longed for certainty. He found that he lived in uncertain times, and he thought the solution to what John said was what he saw, the meaning crisis, although he puts the word in his mouth, is certainty. If we can only get certainty. And I mean, I feel that very much when I feel all shattered. I'm like, if I can only be certain about something, then I'll be okay, and I will, life will make sense, and I will not be this lost. But apparently it's a pathological way to approach being.
What does John know anyway?
I tried both sides. I tried the faith side, because it also refers to Luther, that tried the irrational faith side. And I want to emphasize irrational faith, because you have to, because Luther talked of reason as a whole. So it was emphasis on that. Let all your rationality and reason, let it fall away. It should just be faith without any proof. And then on the other hand, this certainty, mathematical certainty. And I think I've tried both. I was more effective in the faith side because that's easier. Oh, I think it's easier. It came easier to me.
Yeah.
I think it's different people will find different perspectives
Yeah.
easier. But yeah, then this man indeed, who apparently doesn't know so much. I was actually when I was thinking of this episode, talking about him not knowing so much, I had a very strong sense in this episode that he was holding back a lot, that there was a lot of things that he was longing to say, but it was like, no, it doesn't fit into the overall program, so I'm just going to keep it. And I get that sense when I notice that, I'm like, oh yeah, I see that often, that he's holding back a lot of knowledge that he has. It's like, no, it doesn't fit into the context. I'm trying to make a certain point, so I'm not going to share this knowledge here. So yeah.
Yeah, and even I was telling you, like I could sense that he was alluding to things and just trying to say it in programming kind of sentences where it's just like a short, brief statement that you repeat over and over and over again, so that when this comes up later, oh, there's a connection to that episode or whatever, there's a connection to that part of your mind, because it reminds me of like the brevity that you have to have in astrology, or the brevity that you have to have in describing supplements to people. If I show them every single type of zinc or magnesium that they could get, they're going to be like, I'm actually going to leave because actually I feel offended because now too much information has been deposited on me and I am overwhelmed. And so that's either the response that I get. Sometimes people are much more humble with it, where they're just like, hey, that's a lot. Do you have something that you would do? You know, and they want my way. The 1, 2, 3 step. So there's two different ways that I get responded to in that.
You are, and he is realizing what is relevant on behalf of the other person.
Yeah, and then the relevance realization.
Then speaking it so that the other person don't have to go boom.
Yeah.
So you're saving people from that, and I feel John is also saving us from that.
Oh yeah.
Like it's like, I'm just not going to share all the facts because then you're going to be even more bonkers than you already are.
Yeah, so. Yeah.
But yeah.
There's more that I could say here. Just specifically, like what I want to focus on is the fact that you delve into the books too. And so that gives you a whole deeper level. So I'm hitting this at surface level and able to engage in the conversation because he is so well-spoken and descriptive. Like I'm definitely not getting
a good teacher. Yes. Because that's a very good teaching strategy, to throw in some little bombs that you're going to come back later. That's a really good teaching strategy. Yeah. It seems my pronunciation has left me, so I do apologize for anything that I'm going to say today.
It's okay. You speak multiple languages. Give yourself some credit. Okay, so one of the reason we keep talking about this individual soul, we might as well just give away the plot now, because we've discussed Descartes and now we're putting him up against Luther, who we already also discussed. Clearly this is going to be a problem for me too, the coughing, so both of us are disrupted in our speaking today. So Luther, we're going to use this word conscience, accepting without evidence. And what's interesting now that I'm seeing that word is science. That's how you spell conscience. So against science in that sense. And then Descartes, it's consciousness is the word that we're focused on, and only accepting certainty. But there is a shared commitment to the individual isolated self in both of those endeavors.
Isolated individual mind. And then, as I mentioned, the conscious and consciousness was the title of the Thunder Bay. So it's cool. So, and now I see it. Now it's so obvious. It was about religion and science and marrying the two. And yeah, so it's this. It's Luther and Descartes that they presence there.
Yeah, and also too, I wanted to say something about what we feel this endeavor is, like what, you know, and I may need to cut this out, I don't know, but the endeavor that we have of like being collective in these spaces of like exchanging in a more fluid, flowy, emotions involved kind of way. Like there's something to this kind of background religion that's not a religion that's emerging, at the same time that everybody is establishing themselves into, for instance, Orthodox Christianity. Like, this is a big movement now. I mean, I'm also reinvigorating my faith in Catholicism, so it's also present for me. But in my Catholicism, there's a presence of Mary, and that being a very important part of the church. So, and I think in Orthodox too. I don't know anything about Orthodox, honestly, but I don't know. I just felt like that was something that I wanted to say too. Is there's something happening here too, and it's not as visible, and that's fine, but it's not. So that's, yeah, I don't know where that falls into this idea of, well, we're going to get further into like qualia, and what does femininity, what does yin, what does the container bring to the equation? And it's like space for stillness and things to unfold and emotions to come through, and the vessel. So yeah, I just felt like saying that too, that there's that aspect of religion that is very that can be the structure, the construct, the scaffolding, and there's this part of it too that is less formed, more fluid.
And I feel like it would not have been a problem if it was just not visible what we did, but because the feminine has been invisible for so long, that is I think what both of us are like feeling pain about, even like the absence of the feminine in recognized religion. And
yeah, so that relates into this conversation too, because I think this is definitely, I wouldn't say John feels this way. This is just something that we've been working with for a long time now, this reintegration of masculine and feminine together, like coexisting and like being able to mutually exist. And so that being that the kind of like the environment is the challenge, it seems. The arena is the challenge, as opposed to us being able to do it together. No pun intended. Okay. So that conscience then, like we said, it's kind of the Luther, that spiritual side is kind of related with this fluid, accepting without evidence. And then the Descartes side, this real need for like logic and rationality, only accepting with certainty. That feels very young, that feels very masculine. It's like, it's got to be exactly right, I need control.
As our project is, in effect, they're both intertwined and dependent on each other. So
yeah, and don't necessarily have the same job. I think that's kind of the most important part, to have that wave of reflection, that there are jobs sorry for the masculine, and there are jobs for the feminine,
jobs that I'm not attracted to, because that's not what I like, because I'm a woman. And wow, Jordan Peterson is again very present in this conversation.
Yes, man, we brought him in. And it's uncomfortable. I'm just going to say like that, it's uncomfortable to have that conversation. I'm like getting, I was already hot, but I'm like showing.
I have had interaction with women that I met at like dance events, like training dance classes, that if I mention his name, they're like, really, you like that guy? He's like total evil against women. And like, no, he's not. Like, have you read his work? And like I told you, I've interacted with him, I've met him, and he's so respectful towards women. And yeah. So, but nobody apparently wants to hear that women are women and men are men.
Right. And that's so weird. That's such a strange place to be in, because it's considered offensive to describe like what I am. What?
Yeah.
When did it become a crime for me to say I'm a woman and I know what that means? like the thing is like there's this like tugging at your heartstrings to try to
Mm,
make it an argument. It's like,
mm,
but don't you see this person that feels this
mm.
way?
Yeah, no, it's very complicated. And it's also in the priestess circles, it's a dilemma because what we do, I mean, we work a lot with the womb. We work with menstrual blood. And this is the first time that it's actually said, I think, in any of our
Yeah,
recordings.
yeah,
But it's you can, there's only one way to have that.
yeah.
And so it's difficult because we do want to, it's that feminine want to include and embrace and welcome everyone. But if everyone brings their menstrual blood, then
Yeah. Ugh. And this is where that whole question of subjective and objective truth really comes in too. When we have, I've, I've been born in the wrong body, so that's a.
yeah,
What are we supposed to say about that? What is that?
yeah,
Or
yeah,
is that a subjective experience? Are you objectively in the wrong body?
yeah.
We don't even know how you attached to this body. We're trying to figure that out in this episode.
Although I have read that there are differences in the masculine and feminine brain. So I don't know why they don't just look at the brain and say, okay, you've got a masculine brain or you've got a feminine brain. So cool, you're right. You're probably, your brain and your body don't look alike.
Connect.
That should be possible, right? I don't know.
Well, and then the question comes up: is it a construct? Is it, are those social norms, and they're not actual real designations? But you're saying like there would be like brain scan, you could actually
I
like
think there
physically
should
see.
be
Yeah.
because they say that there's a difference between masculine and feminine brains. At least I've read one book that stated that, written by a woman. Uh, so if there's a difference in the brain, then you can see. Obviously, that's not that big a difference. So coming back to the episode, I don't know
Yeah.
how that happened, Sarah, but
I
that
don't
was
know.
interesting. Jordan
Yeah.
Peterson.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
blame Jordan Peterson, but so this book, he actually writes. He said something that was really beautiful. I thought he said like every human face, you can see it's a face. It's a human face. We all have like a nose in kind of the same place, eyes in kind of the same place, a mouth in kind of the same place. But if you see someone, that's Sarah. That's not like any. I'm not going to look at you and think, are you Jordan Peterson or are you Sarah? It's like
Yeah.
there's a difference, especially when you start speaking.
Yes.
I love your voice, Sarah. And it says the brain is the same. That if you look at someone's brain, it's also like, the basic structures are there, like the face for everyone's basic structures, but everyone has their unique little brain or brain
Big brain.
identities. Like if you look at if you look at the brain, you can, and the brains, you will. I don't know. He doesn't say that, but it sounds to me like then you will be able to say, oh, this is Sarah, by looking at if you know the brains. I don't know.
Right.
So
Ooh.
I thought that was pretty cool because our brains very much is who we are.
Yep.
And the brain books that I have is all about that, like how our brains are very much who we are. And if something goes wrong or changes in the brain, you change completely. He starts with Pinier's
Mm.
gauge. It's one of the most, it's in every brain book. They talk about Pinier's gauge. We had like a pole through his frontal lobe, I think. And his whole personality changed. He survived miraculously.
Jeez.
Um, yeah, he was working on, I think, the railways, and then there was an explosion. He explains it the most graphically that I've ever read in all the books, and like I said, it's in all the books. And the steel thing, sharp. Luckily, he said it saved his life because it was sharp.
Mm.
Went right through his brain because there was
Dynamite.
thank you, going, going off and shooting. So it shot right through his brain and it came out. And his skull actually always had that hole, and
Whoa.
parts of his brain were like, wait. But he was like conscious, like he got up and went to the hotel where he stayed. This guy, he actually mentions the name of the hotel owner. He goes in a lot of detail. And they talked with him, and he had some infection, but that recovered. But his entire personality changed. Yeah. He writes about, he calls him Elliot, but it's not his real name, I imagine. The guy had super intelligent, and he was still able to make on paper, rational decisions, and he could tell you what's right and what's wrong. But his life went down the drain because he lost that contact with mattering. Like he lost the ability to tell what's for his own survival. A lot of these people that he write about, they kind of lose interest in their own survival, and you need that apparently to be able to make rational decisions. So it's there's also parts that if it goes wrong, it's because you lost contact with your somatic markers, he calls them. So what the messages your body sends to you, which is also of course part of your survival. And then they also lose ability to make rational decisions because they don't have that emotional input. So he was still very logical, still very high IQ, this Elliot guy, but he just couldn't make good decisions anymore. So you can be a smart person without being a fool person.
Yeah.
That's
yeah. So like all decisions, making all of your decisions based on objective truth, or like
that Spock idea.
Yeah.
It's like totally what it comes boiled down to. He mentions somewhere it's like cold blood, and that's the scariest. Like people killing people in cold blood without any emotion. That's like that freaks us out the most because we can kind of imagine someone was so furious that they strangled someone, but someone that just killed someone without blinking. He tells of a story. I thought it was really cool about a man who came to see him when it was like icy. The roads were icy, and then he asked him, "So how was driving here? Weren't you scared or something?" And he said, "Well, there's a lot of rules that if you drive on an icy road, you have to stick to these rules, and so I was just had to pay more attention to that." Very, he says, without any feeling. And then he also proceeded to say, "The woman in front of me didn't stick to the rules because she started spinning and went into the ditch, but then I passed the same patch of ice, but because I stick to the rules, I was safe." So he like normal people, we see a woman driving into a ditch, we're going to freak out, and I'm definitely going to stop and not go over that patch of ice, even if I know how to do it. But he was so cold and calculated that he just saw that and could tell what went wrong, and then just went ahead, and it didn't affect him at all.
Wow. I mean, this is bringing up a lot of things about, there was something that popped up on my YouTube feed about how we're treating autism as like, oh, everybody just needs to accept that this is how people are. It's like, no, we should really treat this as a mental health issue, like a crisis. If people don't have emotions attached to their actions, this is horrible. This is horrible. And so that was one thing that was coming up. And then another thing that was coming up is, frankly, I feel like this is why Gen Z is so emotional. To bring it back.
I think autism is also on the rise, though. It's that freaking pendulum swing. It's something else that he also talks in here. It's like okay, maybe we don't want balance because the only thing that's in equilibrium is a dead body. But we're kind of really overdoing it at the moment. Like trying to find the emotion and because of this emotionless experience of some people, some other people are just overly emotional. It's like, yeah, chaos is winning over order, it seems.
Yeah. Man.
And that's why people shouldn't dish Jordan Peterson so much, because he is a representative of order.
Order. Yeah. Yeah, so we can't, I mean, he's going to say it later about throwing out the baby with the bathwater, but that's like the real big message here, is that it can't be either or. Even in Discord groups, they'll try to make rules where we have, and it'll be like a team of people that are on the objective side and that's usually like your moderators and your administrators. And then you have the organizers that are more in the subjective state because they're interacting with the community and they're really getting involved in the things. So that was another place that I saw it, was trying to organize communities.
Yeah. And you need both, indeed. It can't be either or. But we need to learn how to communicate with each other, the two different. Yeah, there's a big need for alchemy, like that. The merging of opposites, the transforming.
Cognitive sciencing.
Talking of which,
yeah, so
we're actually
back.
talking about John here, right?
Matter is real. Reality is mathematically measured, and that meaning and value of things is not in the things themselves. So that's where we get to with Descartes in response to Hobbes. The reasoning and computation, or sorry, for reasoning, there's a standard of truth, there's a goal. So acting on purpose, like you were saying, and before the recording, and then truth depends on meaning. So reasoning requires there to be meaning, and since matter is not capable of producing meaning, it is not intrinsically in the matter that meaning exists. Matter cannot make meaning, and there's no pursuit, there's no standard of truth.
So yeah, the reason what they hear, why Descartes is being a little bit annoyed with Hobbes, is because Hobbes says you can make a computing organism from just matter. It doesn't have to be like organic. And with them, computation is more what we will say as reasoning, a reasoning entity. But indeed, then, which he also mentions, ironically, in Descartes' era, that is exactly that. You need to care to have reasonable reason. You need to care about your decisions.
He says it so many times. Hobbes, you idiot. The reasoner cannot be matter. Matter is inert. There's no meaning in matter. Matter has no values. Meaningless, it's valueless. Hobbes, matter lacks meaning. So like I'm just like continuing to write the same thing over and over again. How could those things, how could you get those things out of matter, he says. So anyway, there's a real emphasis here that matter can't create meaning because it's not intrinsic to matter, that meaning is existing. So Hobbes comes back and says things like, but I have an abacus, the paper, the words, you know, when I write them out. CAT versus CHAT. What is that?
Meow, meow.
Inserted. There's no meaning in the material marks. So those letters on the page, they actually contain no meaning. It's the ideas that are the meaning. Descartes says more on rationality and reasoning to answer Galileo's problem, which I believe he's saying that mathematics is the language of reality is Galileo's problem.
I don't know if that's Galileo's problem. I think that is non-problem. That yay, mathematics is the language of reality. But his problem has to do then with this qualities, the primary qualities and the secondary qualities. I think that is his problem.
I see. Okay, so in order to describe mathematics in the way where it can be the language of reality, there's primary qualities and secondary qualia.
Yes.
From Galileo.
Yes, and the primary qualities, yay, for the math explains them really well. That's like, it underlines this idea that he has that mathematics is the language of reality. Because the math, the things that we can observe and measure is in the objects, hence objective. So yay for objectiveness. But then there's this other side.
1 point for Descartes.
Well, I think both are Descartes, because he
Right.
has this, mind and
So
matter problem that he's sorting out, and this is the matter part. The matter part we can measure. So, yay for that. So 1 point for the positivist that we're coming
yes,
later.
that we'll get to later. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so then um another thing too that he said with the primary qualities is that matter resists. So this was going to be one of those words that comes up, or the phrase thrown against, and there being something about that in the objective truth.
Mm.
Okay, yes. And so there's that whole mathematical, and then I was like, yes, it's like you took everything that you can describe mathematically and said that's objective truth, and then everything else is subjective. It's like, what
Yeah.
can't we explain with math? That gets put into the corner as subjective truth or secondary qualia.
Secondary qualities, and then nowadays people talk about it as qualia
I see.
in the neuroscience community. So that wasn't Galileo's term. That's only a recent thing.
Gotcha. So Galileo then just describes primary.
And secondary,
Oh, he does say
but he
secondary.
doesn't name it. He doesn't name it qualia.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, because I mean, you have to be really, really not in touch with reality to not acknowledge that honey has a taste, and flowers have a smell, and there's beauty in the sunset, and so he saw that. Despite the
Nice.
fact that he killed the universe, he still
Yeah.
saw. He must have.
He still wanted there to be roses at the funeral. And then so keywords here under subjective, he says thrown under and dominated. So that was
Yeah.
something that and then this motion of thrown under.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's hide that in the corner, as you said.
Okay, yes, we're storing that away.
Yeah.
All right, so with these subjective items, whatever, subjective, the qualia, they don't exist in the object, only in the mind. And so one of the phrases that I wrote down here was they don't belong in this world, or don't belong to this world, or not touched by this world. How the mind doesn't touch the world.
Mm. I think with world there you have to see matter, how the mind doesn't touch matter, this material world.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. So the books I have with me is before I started reading through the Awakening series or anything that John recommends, I read through Jordan Peterson's recommendations, and it's freaking cool books. So it's a lot of mind books also. And whenever I read Oliver Sacks, it's about the brain, but I always question reality after I read his books, because people, for instance, a part of their brain, I think it's a temporal lobe, I'm not sure, but my hand goes here, so I think it's there. Something goes wrong there and they stop seeing color. And then everyone that has that sees everything in shades of gray. So then I'm questioning the reality of color. And he writes in one of these books, he writes about a woman who just lost complete contact because something in her brain with her body, and she just couldn't feel her body anymore. She just didn't feel embodied anymore. And she had to consciously learn to move her hands again, because what we just look at us, I'm not even aware of what I'm doing, but she just her body just wasn't hers anymore. They were, because something in the brain went wrong. So it's there clearly is a deep connection between matter and mind, but it doesn't seem possible. I think that is the big problem here. Like,
right.
Matter is one thing and mind is another thing. How on earth can they be connected? And yet when something happens to the brain, which is matter, but we think that is also very much our mind, the mind changes and your interaction with matter changes. So it's, yeah. And then Damasio actually refers to these two books that is also recommended by Jordan Peterson as well. So that's why I said before we were recording, John is sneaky again in this episode. He sneaks in a little bit of 4E cognitive science, I think, because it's all about embodied cognition, which is the one of the big E's. And yeah, but it's fascinating. These things are fascinating. Scary.
Yeah. It's so weird because I'm reading things on my page that say subjective only in mind, subjective in mind, not of world. And so, like, what does that tell you then?
And what do you mean with mind? Because what is the brain? What's the difference between brain and mind?
This is where you make me start questioning reality. Good thing we're
I'm
cave diving
sorry.
and attached to each other.
Yeah, you might want to reconsider being attached to me, though. I'm not sure that I'm the safest person to.
No, you drop weights really quick.
No, but I'm really happy that you are doing this cave diving with me.
Me too. Yeah. And even like this is one of those moments where I'm like, yeah, feeling that sense of not seeing the full thing, like you were saying, like little things are being revealed. And so I'm sensing into that. Like I am definitely like navigating this episode in a cautious kind of way. Like I'm feeling around to be sure that the cave walls aren't too close to me and things like that. Like where are we? That's what I'm sensing.
I very much in this episode, and I think the coming ones as well, feel like we're kind of being left in the dark. That John will throw some light on this matter more clearly and make us like breathe a sigh of relief eventually. But for now, still we need to hold our breath a little bit longer.
Yeah.
Type of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Like there's going to be a big reveal, and this is kind of like a scary part where it's kind of like when I don't know. It's just like it's the dark part. I'm thinking of like the Tower of Terror, which is this ride at Universal Studios or something like that, one of those Disney places. And there's the lead up to the getting into the elevator that drops you. And the lead up is like this dark movement through the Twilight Zone, and the car is taking you through all the things, and all symbols and things are like floating around on the screen. And you're gonna get to the point where you get to the front of the tower, and the windows are gonna open, and it's gonna be like drop. That's what I'm like. I'm ready for it, but it's scary.
Oh my! It's so cool that because I've been writing about I'm waiting for the bomb to drop or the ball to drop. I feel like I'm waiting for something big to drop. So it's really cool that you're mentioning that. Like I didn't associate it necessarily with the Awakening series. I just thought it life in general. But we know how synchronous it is our life with this series has become. So
it's alive. Yeah. Huh. Wow. Really making me question subjective, like where does souls bind to, and in this endeavor of going through the series, like there feels like a soul in the series. It feels like not just John either, but we're interacting with content, and in this way it's living in us and coming through our experiences as we talk in the discussions. So yeah, something about that soul. What is that when it comes through, and how would I objectively describe that?
Well, he mentions that Hobbes killed the human soul. And then we were talking before recording, like, why would people say he tried to bring in his faith? And then I said, well, I think it's because he's trying to save the soul. He's trying to keep the soul in. So
Descartes, you mean? After Hobbes killed the soul, then Descartes trying to find.
Yeah. It's very much a battle of soul, which I think is what we're seeing.
Yeah, ensoulment.
Yeah, ensoulment, which is also for you and your other sisters.
Yeah.
Totally.
Cool.
Yeah. And for Descartes, I think I just saw it when we were talking, but I think because the pineal gland was where he said the two connected, and I think that's it, right?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
The small, tiny little.
Makes, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's probably not it. I know that I've heard John say that based on his knowledge of neuroscience, most likely there is no such thing as a soul, like an objective soul. It's
Right.
very much the brain that is who we are and makes us feel ensouled.
Mm.
Mhm.
It's an interesting concept to be certain of. I said
Interesting concept.
it's an interesting concept to be certain of. I mean, but when you have the ability to dig through evidence, I mean, so like that's
Yes.
the thing, is like not to diminish that. I know that that's exactly what he's experienced based on his research, based on,
Yeah.
and like, yeah, decades and decades and decades of work. Not maybe not many. We'll take it down one. Decades and decades of work.
No, and decades and decades. He's
Okay,
60
okay,
something now.
okay,
He's
okay.
exactly 20 years older than me. So he's
And
60,
just in his
well,
life.
61 because his birthday is only later.
So not just like the hyper focus on cognitive science or practices of martial arts or anything like that, but yeah, just like the experience. So
Yeah. 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 And the first time I heard him say that was in Q&A after his meditation, because he used to give, like, through COVID, he gave online meditations, which is online, but it was much better to actually attend. I thought it was much better to attend in person, and then he would have Q&A afterwards. And someone asked something of the soul, and he said, like, I'm afraid the evidence points very much against the possibility that there's
hey,
anything.
I was just
And he
gonna say,
was,
how many times have evidence been wrong?
yeah, but he seemed really sad about it.
Yeah.
He seemed like he really tried to find something to prove that this proof is wrong or something like that. Like, he doesn't say it light with, like, like Sam
Joy.
Harris would say it.
Right.
Sam Harris, I think, would say it like, nah, there's no soul, there's like proof, like, yay, we've got
Yeah.
the evidence, type of thing. He doesn't say it like that. He's like, oh, I really just can't find proof of the soul. It just seems, everything seems to point in the other direction. That's how he said it. That's
And
so.
that's nice because there's the like something that's been coming up for me a lot is realizing that maybe what if Judas knew his role was to like be the one that betrays Christ. And so like what if it is John's role to get to the impasse so that somebody else can either confirm or deny, like
But do say, well, Jordan just called us.
yeah,
So
so
sorry,
I'm
we
just got a
can't really
call from
quite remember
Jordan.
where. We were talking about Galileo's primary and secondary qualities. I'm at the end of my page.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm just about to be in AI will possess no values, no consciousness.
Yeah.
And so there was this part where John, and I don't know if there's any comment maybe that we would have on this part, but he says Descartes really wanted to doubt everything. And it's interesting because we've mentioned that John has said this about the soul and how maybe there's no evidence for the soul. And
I think it's not just that there's no evidence, there's contradictory evidence,
oh,
very strong contradictory evidence as well.
okay.
And that's the big blow. Because, like we were talking, someone's brain changes, their personality changes. And in our minds, at least, the personality and the soul is very closely connected.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
Yeah. So, but it's interesting because there's a reason that we presenced that at the time that we did, because now what my notes are saying, and I'm just going to read through them. Mind is getting isolated. I want to doubt everything. Logical notion of certainty. And then there's this like need to make the logical notion of certainty. And then there's the psychological notion, an inability to doubt. And he's saying that, I think what he's saying is that Descartes was trying to push the psychological far enough to become it becomes illogical. That's exactly what he said. So that there is this ability, or sorry, this inability to doubt that is equal to a notion of certainty.
Yes. So the psychological certainty, logical certainty, you actually can have. It sounds like he's saying, like, there can be logical certainty, like it's very clear, like if there's, then there's, and there's, hence this type of thing. So you can be certain. But psychological certainty is very, very shaky, to say the least, because the people who have psychological certainty is usually the people who are bigots or caught in some illusion, because they're unable to doubt themselves. They're incapable of doubting their beliefs. And you just said, like, how many times have proof been showed wrong? Never mind what we just believe without any proof. And then he uses the example of the white supremacist, it's funny how people generally don't feel sure that they are the weaker. Although that's not true. If you've been indoctrinated enough that you are less than, you will also have certainty of that. What came up for me is almost the St. Paul's thing as well, that his own inner conflict, he reflected totally on God. And it's the same type of thing. Your own inner uncertainty, you want to push to a point of certainty to say, then, and that is how the universe is, or that is how the human soul is, or how cognition is, or how consciousness is. Like taking what you have and then saying, I think making that as above, so below, as inside, so as within, so without, taking it a bit too far, maybe.
Yeah. That's like really bringing up for me that need for that awareness, like that need for the awareness of the brainwashing, which is kind of like what, or the programming, the psychological certainty.
I almost feel safer having no certainties than having certainties.
Yeah.
Because I feel like having certainties is a very, very unsafe place to be, because those certainties will be shattered. So it's safer to learn how to walk on air than to think you're walking on earth, and then the earth just like collapse underneath your feet. But I guess that's a certainty that I have.
I know. This is the problem that I keep running into. Even when you bring up the there being evidence against there being a soul, I sense the resistance in me to believe that, but also the resistance in me to counter it, because I'm like, clearly John has done a lot more research than me on this topic. But then there's also this urge to be like, but he doesn't know everything, you know? So there's like that dichotomy of juggling that, and the lens through which I'm seeing him is like, there's a lot of reverence and a lot of respect, and I know that he's genuinely in pursuit of truth. So he wouldn't lie. And so, but then there's that little gremlin or this beautiful questioner that's like, but still, that even John will say, I don't know everything. And that's like the very Socratic. Yeah. Yeah.
You will be the first person to say that. And that was what I think we were talking about before Jordan called you, is I wanted to say, don't think I got a chance to say it. We were both like completely disorientated now because of that call. But that is a different point. That's not him not having all the knowledge, but he sometimes says of himself that he has a feeling like it's kind of a Moses thing, like he won't be able to enter the promised land that he is trying to create with his awakening series, and with after Socrates, and with the Silk Road series. That you should rather call it Silk Road series. I think it's a better name. The first name that he told me was really awesome, but he changed it to something like Zen and Christianity or something like that. It's like, it doesn't have the oomph. The first time he told me the name, he was something about the sacred, and I was, wow, that's awesome. But let's hope he goes back to that. But But I got distracted by myself.
Okay, yeah, something came up in that distraction, but I think it left me. Yeah, it was before you mentioned the Silk Road thing, but
Moses and the Promised Land.
Moses. Oh, blessed is he who plants the seeds for the trees under shade of which he'll never experience, or whatever, however the quote goes. Yeah.
The seeds of the trees of the shades that will provide the shades that he will never experience.
Yes. That's what I see. Yeah. Okay, so some of the further points here is Descartes kind of comes to this realization that he has faith in math. that or at least he can call into question whether or not there is an evil genius that is programming him to do math for truth. Right?
Yeah.
So in that he
even doubts the maths.
Recognizes this commitment to math is still ultimately based on an aspect of that psychological certainty, because there could be that evil genius. So on the other side of this, I have Descartes cannot doubt he exists, because in order to be subject to this illusion of being under the spell of some evil orchestrator, his mind must exist. So for him to even see that illusion, he has to exist to do so.
And so he's peeling off the layers of what can I know? I think I can know this, but why do I think I can know this? And then the almost the second to last layer is this mathematics. And then it's like, oh, that could have been programmed. So I have to peel that off as well. And then there's this one thing that he can't doubt, that he's doubting.
Yeah. So the existence of his mind is guaranteed by the very fact that he is experiencing this illusion.
There's, if nothing else, an illusion. So he's not immediately saying it is an illusion, but if it is an illusion, at least there's someone having the illusion. That's for sure.
Yeah.
John said something that to me is really important, because he's now building the argument of how we got into this meaning crisis. And through the different episodes, he taught us how the mind lost touch with the world. It used to be that contact epistemology, and we lost touch with that, with being able to, I grasp it, I understand it, I stand under it. We lost that. And now the mind lost touch even with the math. So,
the scientific revolution took all of that contact out of the world, out of matter.
Yes.
I don't know, a lot more was coming alive for me now when we're talking about it, because the scientific revolution is also where we got taxidermy. And there was this moment when you were talking about you recognize somebody's face, and you also recognize a pet's face. You can't do taxidermy on a pet as easily as you can on a wild animal, because people recognize their pet. And there's something in that too about the soul ensoulment and participatory knowing.
The personality of the
animal, has a personality. And it would be so much different if it was out in the woods. And we know that from the fox experiment or whatever, when they're the docile foxes were getting bred with one another, and they started to take on the likeness of puppies. Their snout got shorter, their ears got more curved, and they're cuter. Whereas the aggressive ones, when they were aggressive, they still maintained the wolf, or whatever it was, coyote, whatever they were breeding, the fox, they maintained that aggressive look. And when they would switch the pups, I don't remember what happened, but anyway.
And there were wild dogs, and indeed that became more wolf-like as well in the streets. I just have to point out, when John is mew mew, and you're like, it's a very animal, pet-filled episode.
There's something here about personifying animals too. That's kind of funny. Ensouling.
But maybe, that could actually be another argument against the soul, because animals do have personality. And not everyone will say that an animal has a soul.
There was also something too you were talking about with grasping, and that animals that grasp, even octopus, even the trunk of an elephant that has that grasping
Yeah, that's
ability.
cute.
There was part of that dialogue that I was watching was about grasping, and I forgot the word that they used. Oh, it was Jordan Peterson. It was Jordan Peterson. I swear, he said a word that describes it starts with a P, and it describes being able to manipulate and grasp things. So here again, Jordan's getting looped into this episode for some reason. So yes, no longer able to grasp the world, and all of this personifying animals really comes about too with this whole question of AI.
Yeah. Oh,
And what it
yeah.
is that we fear so much about AI is that it doesn't have that personality, it doesn't have that soul that we're, maybe
Yeah.
we could say some animals might have. But yeah, are you ready to move into that weak and strong?
Yes, yes, I am.
Okay, so with AI, we have weak AI that we're all very familiar with because it makes our lives easier. Laptops and Siri, I guess, could potentially be considered one. So there is machines that do things for us. They don't advance our scientific understanding. But then there's strong AI, which is what we're becoming more familiar with now with ChatGPT and other engines like that of artificial general intelligence. And John even says that this was Hobbes's project. So that's cool. To make a computer that is an instance of mind. How will I know if I've succeeded in doing that? So we'll get into more about Descartes' argument, but yeah, just breaking this part apart.
Well, I was like the whole time I was thinking like Descartes has Hobbes in the corner. He's like he's like totally crushing him. But if you look at what's happening now, I'm wondering if Hobbes might not be like the underdog. Like yeah. But like I said, I don't know if your boyfriend. I don't know how to pronounce it. I'm just calling him your boyfriend. If he's really strong, close even to strong AI, this general artificial general intelligence, like he can absorb a lot of information and distract it and manipulate it, but he can't smell roses, and he can't taste honey. So, and to truly be ensouled, to truly have consciousness, because that is the qualia of consciousness, it seems like you have to have those capabilities as well.
I mean, what's coming up for me is that you would need receptors. You would need receptors for those different stimuli.
Yeah.
So that would be the next programming experiment.
They're
The
probably doing that.
sensory. Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
That they must be like making bodies that can like
Feel. But that's so sick. I mean, just think of like we're getting into really ethical and moral questions here. If an object, I don't know, that you've constructed Frankenstein, Dr. Frankenstein, but like that idea of like, yeah, I don't know, that's terrifying to me because of what I think I understand about human nature, which I don't like, but maybe that's just like a dark place that my mind's going to.
I don't know. I'm not sure that, like I said many times, I'm not sure that I'm not artificial intelligence, and that I'm not, and then I don't necessarily mean that humans made me, but I'm not sure that we haven't been here before. And I think I'm listening to Elon Musk maybe too much, and that is like, because it's there's such a what I see in this human desire to make AI is this longing for God.
Mm-hmm. Me too. Grounding God, bringing God to earth.
And then having a God that's as much like us as possible, so that we'll be able to relate to that God.
Yeah.
And hence our desire to make him conscious, or her conscious, it conscious, and putting our sensory our senses into it, so that it can feel like us and smell like us and taste like us.
Ooh.
And know what it's like to be us.
You know what I just heard?
No.
That conversation about being a woman came back up just now. What it feels, and I don't just like, I know that the whole human experience is, everybody experiences the full spectrum of feminine and masculine. I'm not arguing that at all. But I heard that the feminine coming back in that, what you were just describing.
Well, I heard from Rachel Hayden, what I talked about before. She's trans woman, and she said, like, since she's became a woman, she smells better. And so we do have better sense, or our senses are a little bit more fine-tuned.
Yeah.
Than
I mean,
we
even
are
in the
more sensual.
Yeah. Well, taxidermy, they'll say that women work better with their hands because we're better with fine details. That is like the common misconception on my part, but because I shake, I'm not good with fine detail. But like just in general, they're saying that like women pay more attention to detail. And so that would be like, I know men that have this completely very good ability to move in and out of their feminine, and Jordan Peterson is one of them. Crying in front of people as a man, that's embodying the yin, that's embodying the feminine, and really being able to pull that through. So I don't, the collective discussion is about transgender rights and this kind of thing. That's not what I'm visiting. I'm wondering and exploring this instance of this spectrum that everybody has within them, and just noticing that in all of us, our feminine is not being expressed. And so there's that, what you're saying is like, it needs to be seen, and it's not in the cake of AI. It's just not baked in.
I would also really love to see a feminine woman. It's beautiful that Jordan Peterson's presence is the feminine side in him as well. But I would love to see, because a lot of the women that he interacts with, at least, and that's why he always says, like, no, I'm not talking to a woman. You can hear his voice change when he speaks to a woman. His voice is full of respect, and oftentimes he has conversations with women that it stays like that the whole time. Very tender, very very tender, his voice. And then when he realizes, when the woman starts attacking him, I heard him say once, it's her animus talking to me now. I'm not talking to a woman anymore. I'm talking to her animus. And then his voice changes as well. It becomes the sharp voice that he usually, combative voice he uses more generally with men.
With the masculine.
So I would just love to see a really feminine woman, like a woman embodying the feminine, and not just, because Jonathan Peugeot as well. I told you guys, like, in his presence, I was so convinced I am in the presence of a real man. And I don't know, I think it came up in our conversations, probably is because he has very much integrated his feminine side. And he would say that as well, like, as a member of the church, I'm feminine. In my relationship with God, I'm feminine, because that's the soul, and God is that feminine. So he's very comfortable with his feminine side, and that is why he feels like such a man, I think. And but it would be nice to also see a woman embodying the feminine.
Yeah, well, and I will say, of course, in this realm of the philosophers, I don't see it very much, but I also have the astrology philosophy, and I do see embodied women on that side, really expressing the feminine, really bringing it forward, and in a way that is really well respected. And that's what I really appreciate about this this side of philosophy, the woo-woo, as some people will call it, is that the men oftentimes will maybe embody more of their feminine than you would expect, like in the real physical world. But it's beautiful, because they'll pray in a circle with me all night, they'll cry with me all night, and there's no expectation that I'm gonna fuck them afterward. So that's
that's lovely.
Yeah,
because that's very seldom.
Yes, very seldom, because that's the thing about the spiritual communities, is that you will find particularly just like manipulative personalities. It's just like in there. It's embedded because people are looking for themselves. And once they find the self, themselves, I'm not real me, I'm expressing my true self, that they feel like they have to put that on everybody else and like work with it and manipulate it and get what they desire out of it. And that way they're spreading joy and love and whatever it is. I don't know.
Not joy and love so much, just seed. But
Yes, sharing the seed. Yeah.
Pops up the idea again, like I told you, like we saw it in Augustine and in other religious figures, that it was all about saving their own soul. And I think that's the most irreligious attitude to take. It's to sacrifice your own soul. That is religious.
Okay, so John says this quote, you may not want to throw the Cartesian baby out even when trying to throw out the materialistic bathwater. So we tried to like...
No, doesn't he say you maybe you don't actually want to keep the baby?
You may not want, yes, you may not want the Cartesian baby even when trying to throw out the materialistic bathwater. Good catch.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because
so what's the Cartesian baby?
I think it's a soul.
Yeah.
I think it's a soul. I'm not sure, but because what he was trying against Hobbes then is I think this is the battle that we're currently watching, participating also in a sense, because every now and then we feel that rising, is the battle for the soul. So I think it's his the way he saved the soul.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, because the materialistic bathwater. Oh, Descartes' solution in general. That's why he's saying, do you really want this Cartesian baby? Because Descartes' solution has this existential cost, which is that mind and matter are different and they share no properties.
No fundamental properties.
Oh.
How do they causally interact? I just found the space. So that is a big problem. How do matter relate to mind? Because Descartes makes it practically impossible unless you go with the pineal gland type of thing. And then I wrote the color of pain. I don't think that was his exact words, but the words came up when he said something about how the pain, and I thought it's so beautiful. The color of pain. It sounds like a book.
Yeah. That comes up because I was also telling you about sweat lodges. And we could say that, so with the sweat lodge, you add lava rocks to the middle of the circle and you close down the door. And so those are called doors. And in between every door, you're going to add more rocks. So the first door, as they close it, you'll have like 8 rocks and they pour steam on them and it's hot. And you sit there for a moment and then they open the door. And when they open the door, it gets hotter because somehow like the heat gets pushed into you or something. And then they add more rocks. So now we're up to like 15 rocks. They close the door down, you pour steam on it, and everybody feels that steam hit them again, and it's way worse that time. And so that's what I was saying, is that your measurement of pain is collective because you all experience it together. Of first door feels like this, second door, more heat, feels like this. And you go and you talk about that, and it's all everybody's subjective experience on an objective thing that happened.
Everybody shared the increase in pain, whatever the initial or last measure of pain, because everyone has different pain thresholds, but everyone shared that increase of pain at certain intervals. And it's beautiful. There's something so beautiful in it. I felt it very strongly before, like this collective, because he talks here about how the mind loses also touch with other minds. And I'm not sure if I'm jumping or if I'm jumping back or forward, but that zombie idea, like, how do I know you are real and you have consciousness? And this whole idea of Luther and Descartes had in this, the only thing that they had in common is this isolated individual. And that is a big problem. That's not the future. We know that for a fact. If there is a thing like the future, the individual is not the future, the collective is the future. And so this is for me a way to reinstate, re-ensoul the collective. That having these shared experiences of qualia, that there is, because like I said, it's not often that we can measure, but this is a measure, like if not the exact pain, at least the increase, the fact that they were increases at a certain for the whole group, everyone together.
Because it brings up for me how a lot of the scriptures are written by multiple accounts of similar events. And even like, we don't even have to just take like the Bible, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, but like the big stories, you know, like the Dead Sea Scrolls, like that message getting extrapolated out even further and further. And it's always a collective that's writing. The Kabbalah, like all of these collections of people writing something that it's a story that survives time because of the people that are involved in the storytelling.
Oh, it's beautiful. Actually, we are so, our history is so collective, but we just tell it as if it's an individual story, but it's not.
Yeah, there's the problem of other minds, which was what you were getting at with the zombie thing.
Yes.
That we can't be certain that
I quote him here, but he says, but it's worse. And I had to think of an ad. But wait, there's more. It gets worse.
It gets worse. Just wait. So the only mind my mind touches is itself, is what Descartes comes to this kind of conclusion.
And hence the problem of actually connecting to another mind.
The only thing he had left connecting him to the world was math. And then
we kind of lost that.
You got to let that go. And what do you do when you let that go? So, touchstone of reality, mind touching itself. The touchstone of reality, subjective. And then he says, like, at this point in the argument or the discussion, it would just come out to, you know, no, science tells me it's real. So how do you know it's not a dream? What science tells you is real or what you're experiencing. And then you just get into ad hominem arguments and insults.
Yeah, that unstable grammar of realness. The positivist against the romantics. Like the positivist, like, oh, this matter is real, and this is just like, boom. And then the romantics, no, it's only my subjective experiences that are real. And I don't know the romantics, we'll get to them next time that well. But he's pretty negative about the romantics as well. But he loves William Blake. So there's a contradiction and what is that logical expression?
Little he likes to play a little, we'll say. It's not all business with John. So yes, you kept doing that image of the pendulum. So that's what we're talking about, that pendulum of positivists and romanticists and subjective and objective, and it just kind of layers onto each other. So accounts are split, the mind and the body. And this could, I guess, describe there being a loss of participatory knowing, is what he says here.
Yes. Well, yeah. I wrote it at the same place where I said the mind used to be in touch with the world, but that was lost. Then at least the mind was in touch with the math, but then that was lost. And then at least the mind was in touch with the mind, and then we'll now come to that. And then a loss of that contact was lost. And the contact is perspectival knowing, participatory knowing, procedural knowing, and that was lost.
Yeah.
But he mentioned it's again here of Pascal, but I'm not sure. Because why I said even the contact with the mind is lost, because then he says like, okay, you lost contact with other minds. You don't know if I'm a zombie or not. But it gets worse because the only mind you really have contact with is this instant mind that you have. Because you can't really trust, if you really, dig deep in this, your introspection. You can't trust your memory, but so you shouldn't trust your memory. Right. The past, the history, that contact has been lost or thrown away, actually. So there's only this atomic empty self adrift in empty, infinite spaces of terror.
Says Pascal.
Welcome, Pascal.
I just got a hit of thunder. Just wanted you to know. Hey, Pascal.
Oh,
Infinite spaces of terror, fractured, tortured, tension uh, of current cultural grammar. And then he says that Pascal has a transformative experience where
he doesn't go into that though, does he?
all I got was that he kind of deduces that there is a spirit of geometry and a spirit of finesse. And we
Yeah.
are approaching the funeral of the
Yeah.
spirit of finesse and maybe not able to revive spirit of finesse.
So all I know about Pascal is, like I told you last time, he had that text sewn in his clothes, not the God of the philosophers, but the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So the religion that he came to was very much the traditional religion, actually, then, if that is. So I don't know, I can't remember. I must know this. I must have heard it about the experience that he had. Because one of my professors, the professor that I said, like, I never understood, was crazy about Pascal. He was very much, oh, you should read Pascal. And I did, but I can't remember.
Nothing clicked. Wasn't that great? No, I'm just kidding.
No, it was great, but
Yeah.
I don't know if he wrote about that experience. I think John probably knows it from a different source. And my professor was always just hinting at things. He never actually gave you like answers. He just, that's why he was so amazing, very Socratic. He would just hint at things and like open questions. He wouldn't even actually ask a question. He would be like, maybe it's possible to look at it like that way. And then you're like, is it possible to look at that way?
Yeah. Now that I have permission. Wow, that's cool.
Yeah, it was amazing. He is amazing. He's still alive.
All right. So yeah, it sounds like he was inviting you into a transformative experience.
Yeah.
Okay, and you said that thing, we have lost the importance of procedural knowing how to do things, perspectival, what it's like to do those things, and participatory, which is that reciprocal revelation.
And I wrote, we have forgotten how to kiss, but you wrote it better.
Lost in the scientific revolution, kissing well. Kissing well. So, yeah, that loss of finesse has left us bereft of a transformative experience.
Because how do you transform? You transform by acquiring new perspectival knowledge, by acquiring new procedural knowledge, and most of all, by knowing by the participation. That's how you transform. So if you don't have access to those, you're not going to change by simply learning a lot of propositions.
Nope. Trust me, I've tried. And you don't know them to the extent that they can be incorporated into who you are.
And that's why I don't transform.
Yeah.
Because you don't change. You don't incorporate anything new.
Yeah, right. Well, he does end us back with Socrates, which is funny too because we're reflecting on an old lover in the series. So Venus retrograde is just here and alive.
Oh yeah, I
well.
didn't make that connection. Hello, Socrates. Welcome back.
Hey, Socrates, where's your books?
No, that's Aristotle with all
My
the
bad.
books.
Oh gosh. The books that were written about you, Socrates.
Yeah. It's Socrates with all his questions and Aristotle with all his books.
All his books.
And
yes.
Plato with all his words.
We're watching it all go down. Well, good recap. I needed that. Socrates rejected, you've brought to my attention natural science.
So in that episode of Socrates, he talks about truth and relevance. And relevance is the ability to transform, information that has the ability to transform us. And the natural scientists, so the pre-Socratics, we know them as the pre-Socratics, were full of truth because they were really studying nature and trying. What they said was, we will not consider it truth, but to their observation, it was the best science they had. So that was they were really concerned with truth. While the sophists were basically, they were with the relevance and how to argue a point so to transform people's mind, to change people's minds and to persuade people. So the sophists were very much concerned with this relevance and not with truth. So both were not enough for him. He wanted truth with relevance. And I'm not sure how that relates to this episode.
Well, so that's actually because that's where we're at again. It's literally like the big cycle has returned, and it's like, okay, we did all. I mean, how many episodes have we had since then? I've forgotten what Socrates did at this point. And
so all been like episode 4 or 5, I think.
Okay, so but the point is, like, we're at the scientific revolution now, and it's like, okay, here we are, right back to where we started, right back to, you know, Socrates, know thyself.
Transform thyself.
Transform thyself.
And knowing yourself being a way of transforming yourself.
It's like seeing that the cave, you know, the shadows and the okay, now we realize that there's an illusion. It's like, okay, confirmation. Now we realize there's an illusion. Okay, now we've got like math terms to describe these formulas as they are, forms.
Which is very Platonic. Math was big, or geometry was big in for Plato. So
okay.
So he also respected that and thought that it was a way out of the cave, but not, you needed more than just the geometry.
Okay. And so that was the part that we were exploring.
Yeah, and the geometry is part of the natural sciences, I think. So it's good, but it's not enough.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, yes. Shall we visit with our dear Jordan?
It's
Jordan B.
Jordan B. Peterson, doctor. So I'm not even sure if what I'm going to read is relevant. I had a heart in front of the paragraph, and I want to mention what I wrote here. So what he basically teaches is life sucks. Suck it up. That's Jordan Peterson in a nutshell. Yeah. But he says it better. I hope that these rules and their accompanying essays will help people understand what they already know. That the soul of the individual eternally hungers for the heroism of genuine being. And that the willingness to take on that responsibility is identical to the decision to live a meaningful life. If we each live properly, we will collectively flourish. Best wishes to you all as you proceed through these pages of history unfolding. I added.
Yeah.
Good luck. I feel like I have to wish people good luck, and that terrifies me, but
yeah.
Good luck until we meet again.
Yeah. Wow.
Just what stood out to me as I was reading it is soul.
And collective was really present for me too.
And the genuine being that reminded me of Telich.
Yeah. It feels like we're like now it's been identified. Not to the like almost in the negative, like it's been described a lot of things of what soul is not. And so yeah, I don't know what that means, but I feel like I've got like a better understanding of what it is that we're trying to figure out, what is attached to the material. And thinking into like AI transcending and what that's like. But yeah, that's enough exploring AI for me today. In the dead universe.
But wait, it gets worse.
But wait, it gets worse. The universe is dead. We'll see. There's always something interesting happening here in the ring of fire. We'll be pitting up other philosophers against each other from one quarter to the next in the future. Stay tuned.
Oh, well done.
Thank you.